Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Aldo Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the UAE Tour. Yes, I know it starts tomorrow, so there won't be an Aldo Cycling VELOGAMES podcast episode. It's just going to be me flying solo, but we will try and get a podcast episode out for the Gran Camino, which starts on the 22nd, I want to say. But UAE Tour, let's dive straight in. So of course, obviously, I will remember, by kind of popular demand, we're going to take a look firstly at some of the stage profiles to get a bit of an idea as to what the race will be like, and then we'll go on to VELOGAMES. So we've got a sprint stage to start, a time trial 12 kilometers long, pan flat, stage 3 to the Jebel Jais, which is kind of the less steep but longer of the two climbs in this race. Then we've got another sprint on stage 4, another sprint on stage 5, another sprint on stage 6, and then we've got Jebel Hafit to round out the week on stage 7. Of course, every single sprint stage can be caveated by saying that there might be crosswinds or whatever that splits up the race, or a breakaway might make it to the finish. We've seen that happen in the past as well. So, but we will presume that there will be a sprint on every one of the flat stages just for the sake of simplicity. So that's what the race is going to be like. With two mountaintop finishes, it does make me wonder whether Adam Yates is worth it, because Jebel Jais, given that it's the less steep of the two, of course we saw Rubio win up here last year, and Pogacar's done well here, but he's a bit snappier in a finish than Yates is. I think that Yates is absolutely probably nailed on to win Jebel Hafit on stage 7, but really you need him to also be winning, if not definitely top 3, I'd say, in the Jebel Jais, and then also posting a top 10 in the TT, which I do think is all very worth. Like, it's all very likely that all that's going to happen, but there's also part of me which is thinking about McNulty. Is this terrain more suited towards McNulty? He'll probably do better in the TT, I presume, because he's a bit bigger and probably can just kind of push out more watts. And I think that Jebel Jais isn't steep enough where he'll get dropped. And I think that, you know, he's just looking really good. I mean, of course, he won the Comunitat Valenciana. And I do think I'd be very surprised if a UAE Team Emirates rider didn't win this race. I think it'll be Yates and McNulty. They do lack mountain domestiques, which does make me wonder how the mountain stages will be played out. Whether it will be McNulty is a domestique, and therefore everything that I'm saying is completely useless, and Yates is just the one that they're going for. But it wouldn't surprise me if we honestly saw maybe two UAE riders on the podium with Yates and McNulty. I think that both of them are worthwhile. I don't think there's any reason to not pick them. There's no reasoning for me to be like, no, you shouldn't pick these guys at all. I'd say that picking one of them is definitely a good idea. Bilbao, on the other hand, given that he will likely lose a little bit of time on the TT, and I don't think that he will be capable of dropping Yates categorically on either of these climbs, I would rather take McNulty over Bilbao, is basically what I'm trying to say. So I'm not entirely sold on Bilbao, but could he be the third person on the podium? Yes. But there are some other guys as well. I mean, let's go talk about the GC guys before we look into the sprinters, which I know means I'll be jumping over some people, but just bear with me. O'Connor, of course, he won that race last week, that one-day race in Spain. I do think that he's obviously looking in very good form. He might, again, lose some time on the TT, but probably a very similar amount to Bilbao, I would expect. And so O'Connor, I am also quite favourable of finishing on the podium. Van Wilder, probably a slightly better time trialist than Bilbao and O'Connor. But, and you know, he's been looking decent so far this year. But yeah, more of like a top 5 candidate for me is where Van Wilder stands. For some reason, I'm just not entirely sold on the prospect of him finishing on the podium. But I do think that I could definitely be wrong on that. Jay Vine, again, a bit one who could, you know, on a very, very kind of weird scenario, could finish on the podium in this race. But I do think that UAE will need a mountain domestique in this race. And given that Jay Vine hasn't raced so far this year, I think that he'll more than likely be that guy. Jan Hurt, of course, did very good at up the Green Mountain, I think that's what it's called. But Yates seemed to be on easy mode there, and he just easily dusted him off in the final 200 metres, which is why Yates is such a high favourite to win this race. You've got Max Poole, again, I think he's a good candidate for a top 10, very similar with Ana Rubio. Leonard van Aertveld was, of course, the only man who could beat Vlasov and McNulty in some of the early season Mallorca Challenge races. So Van Aertveld's a cool one, but he will lose a lot of time on the TT, as will Van Zevenont. And then other than that, you got some cheaper ones in like Simon Carr, you got Dunbar as well, Mienkes, Storer, Zvi Hoff, etc., etc. And we'll get to the cheaper ones in a little bit. Sprinters, on the other hand, of course, you've got Olav Kooij, most expensive one at 16 credits. Makes a lot of sense given that he's got pretty much an entire team dedicated to a lead out, and he won the Classic at Almeria with the help of Wout, who of course isn't here. He's just finished up in Algarve. So I think that Kooij, he is the favourite to win at least a stage, I'd say. I'd be quite surprised if Kooij came out of this race without winning a stage. Groenewegen, he left the Alula Tour early because of illness, so I'm not sure how he's going after that, but Groenewegen is usually the kind of rider who at least picks up a stage in these races. Groves, he's fast, but probably a bit more like a versatile sprinter. I don't think he'll be winning a stage, but he's very consistent, and I think that Groves could certainly be one of the more consistent sprinters, because of course sprinting is such a roulette, and you can just get really unlucky. You could just pick a really good sprinter who, for all intents and purposes, could be a fantastic choice, like, say, a Phil Bauhaus. But he might finish twice inside the top 10, and then he might just do nothing because he gets boxed out, and that's just the way that sprinting works. Which is sometimes why it's safer to go with GC options, but given that there is, 4 sprint opportunities in this race, you really can't be neglecting the sprinters too much. There's Jakobsen, who hasn't been great so far this year. In fact, DSM have just been a little bit off in their lead out, so I'm not fully sold on the prospect of Jakobsen, even if he is one of the fastest sprinters in the race. His team is fully dedicated around him, though, apart from Max Poole, so good lead out there. Milano gets the benefit of UAE Team Emirates assist points, but he is one of the more inconsistent sprinters. Without a full lead-out train, I just think he'll be out of position more often than not. Yes, he could certainly pick up a top 3 or 2, but I just think you're wanting consistency with your sprinters in this race. Welsford, on the other hand, I think is good value at 12 credits. He showed in Down Under just how fast he is, and with a good lead-out train, including Danny Van Poppel, I think that Welsford's a really good one for you to be putting onto your teams. Ackerman at Israel, I'm not sold on either. Bennett at AG2R, again, I'm not really sold on. But then again, it is Sam Bennett. He is a very good sprinter, and it's very possible that he could roll back the years and do a really good performance. Cavs 10 credits. He won a stage in the Tour of Colombia. Oh no, sorry, the Tour Colombia. But that doesn't necessarily translate to World Tour victories. But if you're a bit of a romantic, you could go with Cavendish in hopes that he's going to get you a win. Gaviria, again, 10 credits. I would say that Gaviria is more consistent than Cav. I just think Cav's very prone to sitting up in a sprint, whereas Gaviria, I think, is a little bit more persistent. So I quite like Gaviria. Arne Malet will be the sprinter for Intermarché. Did I skip over? There's also Arvid van Klein. I think he's consistent too for multiple kind of, 5th to 10th places. I think that he's really good for that. Viviani. I don't really like Viviani. He burnt me in Down Under, and therefore I'm not looking on him too favourably. I don't know who Lidl Trek will be sprinting for, but there's Consoni, if that's your kind of vibe. Foss is actually quite good value at 8, given the time trial, and also he will probably be the GC leader, I presume, for Ineos Grenadiers. 8 credits is actually pretty good. Fretin, I think, will be the sprinter for Cofidis. Marechko, maybe not, but this isn't the Tour of China Lake, so therefore he might not do too great. Riccatello's not bad at 8, but he will lose so much time on the TT. Steinhauser, a bit of an outsider, but at 8 credits, that's quite a lot. Tejada was good in Tour Colombia, but again, he'll probably finish top 10, but probably not too much than that. 6 credit riders, there are some good ones in here, I will admit. You got Rainer Keplinger, who was top 10 in the Volta Comunitat Valenciana, so I think top 15 is a pretty decent ambition here. Bart Lemon, I'm actually quite surprised at 6 credits, considering that he was 5th place in GC at the Tour Down Under. One of the only climbers on the Visma Lease bike team, or climbers, I guess. We've got Volta here as well, Valter. But Bart Lemon, I think, is pretty good for a top 20 GC, in all honesty. So I definitely think Bart Lemon's a good one to be picking. You got Ivo Oliveira for the assist points and also the TT stage, so that's not too bad. Jason Osborne can pull out some good performances every now and then, but somebody like Valentin Palipentel is much better, considering that, yes, he will lose time on the TT, quite a lot, but at 6 credits, he could do well on Jebel Jais and Jebel Hafit. Again, another one who was good in the Tour Down Under, so I think that Valentin Palipentel is a good one to be going with. You got a lot of Ineos Grenadiers riders here, but I'm not really favourable towards any of them, to be honest with you. And that's about it for the 6 credit riders. 4 credit riders, you're looking towards a lot of youngsters here. You've got August Jensen, you've got Beloki, Michael Leonard, Lovan Bell, Henry van den Abele. I'd say your best bet is to go with just assist points. So I would go with probably Starkervergelagen, just for the assist points on UAE Team Emirates. And I don't know, maybe you could go for, and then just anyone who you think is going to be doing decent. Like, you could go Lovan Bell just for the assist points on Olav Kooij, I suppose. Or you could go for people for like the TT as well. So Madver Schmidt is known to pull out some decent TTs. Johan Price Peterson as well. There isn't like a massive depth of TT quality here, so he could sneak a top 10, as could Ryan Mullen, who, if he rolls back the years a little bit. But in all honesty, if you go for those if you're feeling a little bit risky, but I'd say that the safe option is to go with assist points on the GC contenders. This is my team at the moment. We've gone, it's very subject to be changing, but I think Merlier, I don't think I even talked about Merlier. Merlier, I think, is just a really good pick. I think I just didn't talk about him because he's like de facto in my team. Merlier is probably one of the first people who you should be putting into your team, given how good he was at the Alula Tour. There you go. That's my opinion on that. So I've got Merlier, Welsford and Kooij because I believe that they are the fastest sprinters in the race. I've got O'Connor and McNulty in here, but I'm not certain on my GC prospects here. I could certainly change this round and go with Yates. And then instead of O'Connor, I could go with a 10 credit rider. I could go for a sprinter in terms of like Gaviria, or I could go with a GC option, in which case I'll probably choose Simon Carr. So we'll go with him for now. And then we've got some good 6 and 4 credit riders in there. So that's kind of what I'm going with. It's quite a split strategy. I don't know whether to go really in and just go with one GC rider in Yates and then just have everybody else as sprinters, considering that you've got 6 credit riders who are fulfilling a sort of GC prospect criteria. You could definitely not go with Carr and say just bank on a Gaviria to do well here, and in which case you have 4 sprinters, and I think that's pretty good. I would say that it's probably a good idea to have at least a GC prospect in there, just to try and get in those kind of daily classification points, because of course Jebel Jais being on stage 3, you're going to get GC like daily points on stage 3, 4, 5 and 6. So if you got somebody who's leading after the Jebel Jais, that's going to be like 100 points worth of GC points, and if they're also a good time trialist, you'll get them at the end of stage 2 as well. So it's certainly worthwhile getting a good GC rider who's also good at time trialing, because you'll just accumulate more GC points daily from stage 2 onwards. But let me know what you're thinking in the comment section down below. Are you just thinking of going like all sprinters? Are you going Yates without Yates, that kind of stuff? And yeah, of course, come back for a Gran Camino, and all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Salut.